Christy Paul.
Always good to see you, even this early on a Sunday morning. Thank you for being with us. New this morning for you, the Republican health care bill on hold yet again. Overnight, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell putting the brakes on this week's planned vote after word that Senator John McCain's recovering from surgery. He had to have a blood clot removed.
Now, that means the senator will not be returning to Capitol Hill this week, and one of the president's big agenda items will not be moving closer to his desk for signature. It's the president's stalled agenda, leading to dropping approval numbers in this new poll from the Washington Post and ABC News. It's down to 36%. 60% now say they disapprove.
Also this morning, the president's re-election campaign paying big money to his son's legal team. The $50,000 payment coming just days after Jared Kushner disclosed his secret meeting with a Russian lawyer at Trump Tower.
Plus, from FBI director to author now, James Comey writing a book about his public service. What else will this meticulous memo taker say about his role in the 2016 election and his Oval Office interactions with President Trump?
So plenty to discuss with me now. CNN political commentator and political anchor at Spectrum News, Errol Lewis, and White House correspondent for the Washington Examiner, Sarah Westwood. Good morning to both of you. Want to talk about these poll numbers that we're seeing first and foremost. The approval rating, as we saw, dropped to 36%. It was 42% back in April. We're hearing that part of that may be that 48% of the people only see President Trump's leadership in the world weaker since the inauguration, and they are also seeing an inability to progress some of his policy. That's what's citing some of these low numbers. Errol, what is your initial reaction to the numbers we're seeing coming out this morning?
These apparently are some of the worst numbers in decades, and so you have to go back almost to the Ford administration, I think, to see the level of disapproval quite so high, quite so early in a president's term. So that causes some problems for the White House. My sense of it, though, I got to tell you, Christy, is that I think that some of the distrust of whether or not the administration is doing the right thing on the world stage ties back to some of this uncertainty about the financial dealings of the Trump family, Donald Trump in particular, the lack of the tax returns, never quite knowing whether or not it's the country's interest or some private financial interest that's being advanced. Because if you probe into the poll, what it says is that people are not trusting this administration to do the right thing when it comes to sort of deal making and negotiations internationally. That level of uncertainty, I think, accounts for a lot of those negative numbers.
Sarah, do you expect that President Trump will address these numbers? Because, nobody likes negative numbers, of course. But you have to wonder if seeing what we're seeing this morning will drive him to act in any way.
Well, I think President Trump is famously mistrustful of polls, so I don't know that seeing any particular number will have an effect on him, just because we know from our experience on the campaign that he discarded any number that portrayed him unfavorably, and then he embraced any poll that showed that he had a lot of support. But I think if you look at his poll numbers and you watch the way they fluctuated throughout his presidency, it's really not been tied to any one incident that Washington has labeled as catastrophic. The numbers have sunk more than anything because President Trump has not been able to advance his agenda, either on Capitol Hill or even when he tries to go it alone. The courts have stopped him. And so you've seen the numbers drop, not sharply after something controversial happens or emerges about the Russia controversy, but steadily and slowly as his agenda continues to be gummed up on Capitol Hill and in the courts. That's one of the major reasons why we're seeing the numbers stagnate, and it's really difficult to see how he gets around that as long as the controversies are still raging. And
in all fairness, polls weren't exactly accurate going into this this election either. So there is a lot of question about the accuracy of them. So let's talk about what you were just talking about when we look ahead to policy and the fact that health care is now put on hold again. Errol, he said it's delayed. Help me. They didn't reset it. We're in a kind of waiting game now, aren't we?
Yes, and look, the fact of the matter is, if somebody like John McCain, if any one of the yes votes that the Republican majority has, Senator McConnell can't afford to lose even one senator. And the pause may turn into a long-term pause because they just don't have any wiggle room here. You've already got Senators Paul and Collins saying that they're going to be hard-nosed even on the procedural question of whether or not it should be allowed out onto the floor for a full vote. You've got the Republican senators, including Sandoval in Nevada, certainly Kasich in Ohio, important states who are saying that this is going to harm them and it's going to harm their states, and they're urging no votes. So the White House hasn't quite figured out the politics on this. And as long as that's the case, both the White House and the Republican leadership are going to decide to sort of keep this on ice until they've got something approaching a decent chance of getting a yes vote.
That could be problematic, though, when you look ahead at how they want to tackle taxes. And in fact, Vice President Pence talked about that yesterday. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We're talking with members of Congress and senators every day on our tax cut plan. Discussions will continue. Details will be worked out. But I'll make you a promise. With the leadership of President Donald Trump, we're going to pass historic tax relief, and we're going to pass it this year.
So, Sarah, the problem, as I understand it, is they were hoping the health care numbers were going to drive what they do with taxes. If they don't have the health care numbers, how do you reconcile, or how do you move forward with taxes if health care isn't reconciled?
Republicans haven't answered that question. That's why you haven't seen any substantive plan emerge so far about what direction they're going to take tax reform. There's closed-door conversations. These meetings with stakeholders and conservative groups and people who are helping to shape the policy have been going on for months now, since the early spring, but yet we haven't seen anything more than just broad top lines of what that policy might look like emerge, because they're waiting on that health care bill. And that's why delaying this health care bill indefinitely is so much more consequential for Republicans, because the rest of their legislative agenda sort of depends on that health care legislation. So they were hoping to get tax reform passed. They were hoping to even maybe take a look at getting an infrastructure package done this year. But none of those items can get done as long as health care is consuming all of the oxygen on Capitol Hill, and they're running out of time. The legislative calendar does not have very many days left on it for this year. So as long as health care is in limbo, it's not clear that they are going to be able to pass anything else.
It makes you wonder how health care may become a stoplight from any other policy moving forward until that at least can be figured out. Thank you so much. Errol and Sarah, we appreciate it. We're going to hit pause here for a moment, though, because I know that you're staying with us. We want your voice and a couple other things coming up here. Also, a heads up to you on State of the Union today. Democratic Senator Mark Warner, Maine Senator Susan Collins, and Jay Sekulow, attorney for President Trump, joined Jake Tapper at 9 a.m. Eastern right here on CNN.
Plus, the White House beefing up its legal team amid a PR crisis. How this new White House attorney will have maybe the toughest job of all, controlling the messaging coming out of the White House in response to the Russia scandal.
Also, the FBI director who was fired by President Trump is writing a book, and a lot of publishers apparently are interested.
And a close U.S. ally has some choice words for President Trump, let's say, after he told the First Lady of France that she's in such good shape.
I wonder if she could say the same of him.
As moms, we send our kids out.
Deal with this on a day-to-day basis, and you see Abby Lowell coming in to represent Jared Kushner. Abby is a well-known criminal lawyer, represented John Edwards recently in his problems, and so you see the shifting in legal representation. Jamie stays in as the ethics person. Jamie Gorelick stays in as the ethics person. Abby comes in front and center on the criminal side. So people are becoming more sensitive to the fact that this is a criminal investigation. It is not a hoax. It is not a witch hunt. It is a serious legal matter, and they are beginning to take the first steps they should have taken months ago, probably, to recognize the jeopardy that they're potentially in.
In another bit of legal news related to the White House and the Trump family, according to an FEC filing, the committee to re-elect President Trump paid $50,000 to the legal firm that is now representing Donald Trump Jr. about 2 weeks before that New York Times story broke regarding a meeting between Donald Trump Jr. and a Russian lawyer in Trump Tower. CNN has not been able to confirm whether or not that payment was made specifically for legal representation for Donald Trump Jr. In fact, the filing cites that it is for legal consulting. Now, CNN has reached out to the Trump family and to that law firm, but we've yet to hear back. Back to you.
All right, Boris, thank you very much. Our panel back to discuss all of this. Errol Lewis, CNN political commentator and political anchor for Spectrum News, and Sarah Westwood, White House correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Errol, to you first on this $50,000 paid to this law firm in New York. As Boris said, they could be unrelated, the Russia probe, Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting, and this payment. But with the ambiguity, the lack of clarity surrounding the chronology and who knew what when, could this have been preparation for the oncoming controversy?
Well, yeah, there's a range of reporting that suggests that there were White House officials and legal talent that knew weeks ago that this was coming. So, yeah, this is just kind of more in that direction. I think, though, the other question, Victor, that comes with this is, if they're paying for Donald Trump Jr. through the campaign going forward for the re-elect, and then we look back at this meeting in June of 2016 when he's there with the campaign chairman. The question is, was he a campaign operative? Was this something that, instead of simply acting as if this was the meddling of a novice who was just trying to help his dad out, maybe this was something that was official to the campaign and something that the campaign has to answer for. If you're going to pay the legal bills of Donald Trump Jr., if you're going to have him sit in at the highest levels when the campaign is in full swing, then, his actions, while he may characterize them as just a son trying to help his father, maybe they are official campaign actions, and that triggers an entirely different set of legal and regulatory questions about what was proper.
Let's talk about another angle of this the growing legal teams, Sarah, as we heard from Boris. Ty Cobb being added to the team, his job now to shape the message, the response to the Russia probes from the White House. He may have the toughest job of all in the White House or on the White House staff, but it may be less about what he can do and this shrewd, smart attorney, as his colleague described him, but the president's willingness to comply, the president's discipline as it relates to a message. Is there any evidence that Ty Cobb will be able to keep the president off Twitter?
Well, I think that the hiring of Ty Cobb and bringing him into the White House is sort of an acknowledgement by the Trump aides and maybe the president himself, who signed off on this decision, that this is becoming a more serious legal issue, and that even if they disagree with the basis for this investigation, that it could still yield criminal charges for folks if they don't comply with document requests, if they lie to investigators, if they obscure what happened. So this is a recognition that the situation is becoming more and more serious every day. And also, I don't know that referring reporters to Mark Kasowitz, that just trying to brush off all questions of Mark Kasowitz, it's President Trump's current representation, who is outside the White House, has been an effective strategy, because it still leaves a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of loose ends, in the sense that the White House isn't addressing these questions head on. So having a lawyer in the White House able to shape the White House's response to these types of questions could help the West Wing appear more transparent. And it's not clear that Mark Kasowitz ever sought or obtained a security clearance. So it's important to have an attorney that is able to access classified information, given that this investigation has to do with material that is so sensitive. So bringing someone in-house who has that capability could also help sharpen the legal defense.
But, Errol, even with a security clearance for Ty Cobb, the president, even yesterday, called this the probes into the Russia potential cooperation or collusion a hoax. The president, is he on the list of people who are, as Attorney Zeldin said a few moments ago, starting to realize exactly how serious this situation is?
I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I don't know if Donald Trump, I don't know if the president thinks that he can sort of pardon himself and most of his team if everything really goes south. But just as you suggest, there's a really difficult task that Ty Cobb or anybody else is going to have in trying to create a coherent, protective legal strategy for this White House, which is that you've got somebody in the form of the president who, on a whim, can sort of throw out a statement on Twitter or throw out a statement to the press that upends the entire strategy. And, you know, and it's not just Twitter, by the way. You know, when Donald Trump Jr. went on Fox News this week and gave a series of less than credible, less than truthful statements about, less than complete at a minimum, statements about what happened in that June meeting, he too is sort of creating legal exposure for multiple people within the campaign and now the White House. So, you know, Ty Cobb is going to have his hands full trying to get a coherent legal message and strategy in place as long as the Trumps, father and son, insist on sort of creating their own strategy and kind of winging it as they go along.
All right, Errol Lewis, Sarah Westwood, stick around with us. We've got one more segment with you, and we got to talk about some of the other issues that are coming out of Washington. We'll be right back with you. Christy?
Well, because, you know, it's been past 9 years that O.J. Simpson has been behind bars, but expectations are very high that he's going to be released soon. Right now, he's getting ready to meet the parole board. That happens this week, and our legal experts have a few things to say about that. Also, Kid Rock's tweet about running for the Senate. Apparently, it's no joke for Democrats.
Singing Sweet Home Alabama all summer.
Welcome to Sunday. We're always grateful to have you here. I'm Christy Paul.
I'm Victor Blackwell. Good morning to you. If you're just waking up, the big news, the Senate vote on the Republican health care bill has been delayed again, this time because Senator John McCain is in Arizona recovering from surgery.
As President Trump's agenda stalls and the Russian controversy swirls, a new Washington Post poll showing the president's approval rating dropped to 36%.
We're also learning the president's re-election campaign paid $50,000 to the law firm that is now representing Donald Trump Jr.
Also new this morning, former FBI Director James Comey writing a new book about his experiences in public service. So a lot of people curious, what is this going to reveal perhaps about the 2016 elections or his dealings with the president before he was fired? Errol Lewis and Sarah Westwood are back with us. Sarah, I want to get your take on that. What is the expectation for this book and what may or may not be revealed?
Well, I think we just don't have any idea what James Comey is looking to put forward in this book. I think any account of his public service would be incomplete if he didn't include at least some details about how the 2016 campaign unfolded and his final days in the FBI before he was dismissed by President Trump. But certainly we're hearing that if he's willing to include some of the juicier details from his time in office, particularly over the last 2 years, that he will be receiving an enormous payout for that book. I think it'll be an instant bestseller. I'll certainly want to read it if he includes some of those very interesting and still unknown details from those last very controversial couple years of his service. So this is going to be one of those rare books that kind of unites Washington. Everybody wants to read it, one of those potentially explosive accounts. We just don't know how much he's allowed to or willing to include in it.
Errol, do books like this, tell-alls, may be it, really have any effect on a current or a past president or administration?
I don't know if it will affect this or any other administration. I mean, the question is it going to be a tell-all or a tell-some, right? Because if you want to get into a bidding war, if he's talking with a book agent, if he's talking with publishers, one of the things they will tell him right away is that to the extent that you can put a bombshell in there, something that nobody else knew, you know, it really could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. And so it's a real serious thought that he's got to give to it. I suspect that a lifelong public servant like Mr. Comey doesn't really even quite understand how explosive the information that he takes for granted is, how badly the rest of us want to know what was going on. I'll certainly be queued up, just like everybody else, to see if I can get an interview with him if and when this book appears.
All righty. Let's talk real quickly about what happened in France and the Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop's reaction to it that has really garnered some attention this morning. Let's look at what happened when President Trump met there in France with France's First Lady.
If he said that to you, would you be flattered or offended?
I'd be taken aback, I think. It's a rather interesting comment to make. I wonder if she could say the same of him.
Errol, I saw you flinch for a second when you, yeah. What was your reaction to her reaction?
I have to say, by the standards of the Access Hollywood tape and the vulgar and obscene comments we've heard from Donald Trump over the years, I didn't think of very much of his comment to the First Lady in Paris in the first place. And once in a while we get a reminder, I think this is one of them, that we just elected our oldest president ever, and he's going to have to get used to the standards of a world in which there are a lot of female heads of state, foreign ministers, others who are expecting a different kind of, even if he sort of well-intentionedly wants to sort of offer a compliment, there are new standards now. He's going to have to get used to that.
Sarah? What about you? What about, I mean, I understand what Errol is saying, no doubt about it. This is a man that has been in office, or not in office, but in big business for many, many years. It did seem out of the ordinary.
It did, but I think that this comment, while it was a little off-key, it wasn't significant in the context of his trip. It didn't seem to at all impact his relationship with the Macrons. It was an otherwise very successful trip from the perspective of the White House. The comment sort of went viral on social media, got a lot of attention, but overall, I don't think that it was a big deal. A lot of President Trump's critics like to focus on any and all flaws in the administration that they can find, but certainly this is, like Errol said, pretty tame by Donald Trump's standards, and I don't think that it had any kind of effect on his trip to France.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And he said, she looked beautiful. Errol Lewis, Sarah Westwood, always appreciate your voices. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Democrats are taking Kid Rock's Senate run plans seriously. The singer, also known as Robert James Ritchie, because that's his real name, took to Twitter this week to announce his intentions, responding to questions about what appears to be his campaign website. His tweet insisting that this is not a joke, which many still believe it is. Now, we put potentially what this may be aside. Senator Elizabeth Warren responded to the announcement in an email to her supporters saying, well, maybe this is all a joke, but we all thought Donald Trump was joking when he rode down the escalator at Trump Tower and announced his campaign, too.
The White House under fire, perhaps, from Fox News. Fox News host Shepard Smith launched a blistering attack on Friday after the revelation that as many as 8 people were in that controversial meeting with Donald Trump Jr. in 2016 at Trump Tower.
Why is it lie after lie after lie? If you clean, come on, clean, My grandmother used to say, when first we practice to, oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. The deception, Chris, is mind-boggling. And there are still people out there who believe we're making it up. And one day they're going to realize we're not and look around and go, where are we? And why are we getting told all these lies?
Shep Smith always has been such a popular journalist there at Fox. Smith's rant, though, didn't go over well with some of their viewers who've taken to the internet now calling for him to be fired.
All right, O.J. Simpson set for a crucial date with parole board on Thursday. We're going to check in with our legal expert who says that Simpson should be released without question.
Also, scientists say 3/4 of all species could disappear in the coming centuries. Any way that we can reverse this course?
From Wimbledon and in southwest London, it's good to have you with us, Ravi. First, let's talk about the big question today. Will Roger Federer make history? What to expect with this match?
Well, George, the atmosphere is building nicely. Roger's going to take to the practice court for a final hit before that final, which is going to be taking place around 3 hours' time with the Senate court just behind me. I think he's going to be the favorite in this match for sure, George, because he's played 11 Wimbledon finals. He's looking to become the first man to win 8 Wimbledon titles. And if he wins the title, he'll be the oldest Wimbledon winner on the men's side since 1930. He's also going to be the heavy crowd favorite. He's playing great tennis, has yet to lose a set the entire tournament. tournament, so certainly he is the favorite in this final against Cilic, although Cilic last year when they played here did have 3 match points, and he's beaten him at a Grand Slam before at the U.S. Open 2014.
All right, we'll have to wait and see, Ravi, and let's talk more about the significance of this big win for Spain's Garbiñe Muguruza, defeating Venus Williams.
Yeah, it was such an impressive win for Muguruza because Muguruza became the only player to beat both Serena and Venus, obviously in a Grand Slam final, and it continues just such a great path for these Spanish sportsmen, sportswomen. In 2017, Sergio Garcia winning the Masters, Rafael Nadal, who was winning the French Open, and now Muguruza, who won this title at Wimbledon. And so obviously it's been a great run for her. She has to go about now winning some tournaments outside the Grand Slams, but she has shown on the big stage she loves to compete on the biggest of stages.
Ravi Uva at Wimbledon, thank you so much, and thank you for being with us here for CNN Newsroom. I'm George Howell in Atlanta.
And I'm Cyril Vanier in Paris. For international viewers, the headlines are next. And for viewers in the United States, it's New Day right after the break.